Hello, today is Friday, November 21st, and welcome to episode 530 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm going to say we might actually have a debate here, a real strong debate here today, so stay tuned, guys. I'm
Buckle
NSI.
up.
So yeah, buckle up. Senior fellow, that's not even the major debate, senior fellow Jessica Jones. And I'm joined today by NSI founder and executive director. I don't know why we put him first on this script. Jamil Jaffer, NSI advisory board member Les Munson. We're going to put you at the back, Jamil. And my now colleague and senior fellow, Morgan Vigna. Okay, folks, today we're talking about Russia, Ukraine. We haven't talked about it in a few days. So we might be, fingers crossed, at an inflection point. I want to see what you guys think. There have been stories this week about the Trump administration's new 28-point peace proposal that was drafted by Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. We had input from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance. We also have Jared Kushner in there. And so it's a proposal that would, bring an end to the conflict. The high level, the top lines are, it would require Ukraine to give up territory. It would cap the size of Ukraine's military, and Ukraine would permanently renounce NATO members or bids to join NATO. In exchange, Ukraine would receive, I'll just call them U.S. in air quotes, security guarantees. So we can talk about what that might mean. There'd be a major reconstruction package, in part funded by frozen Russian assets. And then there would be a broader U.S.-Russia economic agreement. The plan is now circulated. Both Russia and Ukraine leadership has it. Some of the demands have been ones that Ukraine has rejected, but as we've recorded this morning, we're here Friday morning, Ukraine has not renounced the deal. The proposal caught Europe off guard. Diplomats say they were blindsided, and even some officials report that they only learned about the proposal through leaks. Some critics argue that the plan mirrors Moscow's longstanding demands. And it seems that Russian envoys are happy with the deal. Axios reported that they said, we feel that the Russian position is really being heard this time. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, guys. So here we are. President Vladimir Putin has not publicly endorsed the plan, and Zelensky has agreed to begin discussions about it, especially with the Trump administration. So first, because I know Jamil's ready to interrupt everybody, I'm going to turn to Morgan.
I could. Thank you, Jess. I appreciate that because I do not want to be caught up in what is about to follow. So what is your question?
What do you 28 points, that's reflective of, the Gaza proposal of 20. There's some pretty tough concessions made on Ukraine here. What do you think of the chances of Ukraine agreeing to this? Is this just the opening salvo of a longer discussion? Is this really an inflection point?
Yeah. So look, I think we all agree on this podcast that this initial take at a peace plan is complete garbage. It completely favors the Russians. A Russian actually is alleged to have really written this first draft, right? So clearly it is favored towards the Russians. It really screws over Ukraine. President Zelensky was very measured in his, initial response to the peace plan. Members of his cabinet and members of the Ukrainian government have not been so charitable and have actually been very vocal in their opposition to it, as they should be, right? And it's unclear to me at this point whether this is just the Trump administration's effort to get something on paper that they can actually negotiate with, if this is just a starting point, because it's hard to believe that the Ukrainians would accept something like giving up the entire northern part of the Donbass region, right? Cutting the size of the Ukrainian army in half. I mean, these are real choices that sovereign choices that a nation state makes, and this peace plan is a complete infringement upon it. Meanwhile, Russia is unrelenting. They continue to bomb Ukraine. I think also that Russia is really trying to seize advantage and is very opportunistic in the sense that Zelensky right now is dealing with his own political crisis at home with respect to corruption allegations. This is a real chance for Russia to exploit that, which they are doing. And not only that, but Russia hasn't really, made any concessions to anything. If they wanted this war to stop, if they wanted a ceasefire, they could have done this 3 years ago, right? So at the end of the day, if this is just something to get on paper and start that conversation, okay, fine. But I don't see this going anywhere, and I certainly don't support the Trump administration trying to force the Ukrainian surrender of part of its territory, down its throat. So, with that, I turn it over to Jamil and
No,
Les.
yeah, I'm gonna go to Les, which I wish we had the interruption counter today because I would like to see what happens. Like Les, President Trump and Putin, we've had summits, we've got tweets, all caps. They've been back and forth between these two world leaders, and yet we get a 28 proposal that doesn't show really any progress from any of these hard conversations. To Morgan's point, Russia doesn't seem to be making any concessions. Is this deal, if this were to move forward along these 28 points, just really a reward to Russian aggression? Do you think it's going to move forward?
I don't think so. I think Zelensky is trying to walk along a fence line here of not irritating President Trump, but not agreeing to this plan. And I think the interesting thing to watch is going to be his behavior over the next few days and how he deals with this, because I think the Trump administration has been fairly consistent in the last year or so, looking for an end to the conflict and being willing to make a lot of concessions to the Russians. And Zelensky probably can't sustain that. This would be, if he agreed to this, it'd be the end of his presidency in Ukraine. On the other side of the coin, Putin can't agree to anything that makes him look like he's losing. So he needs something that makes him look like it's a win. And this would do that, which I think is, so there's a huge dilemma on the way forward. I think Trump is really pushing to get some sort of ceasefire in place and is willing to break a little China to get there. I don't think this is going to get him there. I don't. But that's what I think is the effort behind this. He wants to get a ceasefire, and then you can get to some sort of real negotiation going on. At the end of the day, some of this stuff in this plan, there's going to be some version of that likely in a future deal. There's going to be territorial concessions by the Ukrainians. Frankly, we knew that 11 years ago when Russia first went into Crimea. They're never going to give up Crimea without some sort of radical change in Moscow, which I don't see happening. So this is probably a step forward in the sense that at least we're seeing on paper what a possible deal could look like. It's probably tilted way too much in favor of the Russians. So it'll be interesting to see what Zelensky does from this point.
Jamil, I don't have a prompt for you, so just feel free to go.
Well, look, I think, other than putting this on paper, this is complete garbage. So this is a waste of time. This is silly. They're not. Les is right. They're not going to get to a ceasefire with this because this is amateur hour. This is literally if Ukraine completely gives up, loses basically all elements of sovereignty, gives up territory in its own land, gives it to Russia, literally gives it to Russia, not it's occupied or whatever, but it actually is part of Russia. And agrees to caps on the size of its military. What nation in the world is going to agree to a cap on the size of its military? Why would NATO agree to not expand? NATO agree to not put any troops in Ukraine? That's none of these things are starting points. It completely rewards the Russians for everything, for all of their aggression in 2015 in Crimea, which we should have stopped when President Obama was in office, their aggression in 2022, which we should have stopped when President Biden was in office. And frankly, President Trump is making a massive mistake because he's simply repeating the errors of President Obama and President Biden by giving the Russians a benefit for their aggression. So if President Trump likes to have the same foreign policy as Joe Biden and Barack Obama, then hey, here you go. This is what that was. Give up Crimea, force Ukraine into submission. Hey, this is a great foreign policy if that's what you like. But if he wants to be a real Republican and have a real conservative foreign policy and have a foreign policy that believes in America leaning forward and support its allies, it's not this one.
Jamil, Jamil, I think two things can be true, right? Yes, this is a garbage peace plan. At the same time, you have to start from somewhere, right? And I don't think that the peace plan as it is written right now is going anywhere, but actually taking the action to have something on paper, even if it's potentially written by a Russian or allegedly written by a Russian, um, is a start, right? And I think it's more than that we had before. And so now I think it is incumbent on this administration to work closely with the Ukrainians, with the Europeans as well, and ensure that, this is more measured and more appropriate to recognizing and preserving Ukrainian sovereignty moving
Morgan,
forward.
this is a start. Like Neville Chamberlain's visit to Munich in 1938 was a start. Sure, he started by saying, let's give up. And so if that's how you want to start, then great. It's sure it's a start. But it's the United States putting the full force of its world leadership and President Trump and his effort to broker peace in Gaza, right? What looks like to be a successful effort, largely in Gaza, or hopefully a successful effort in Gaza. And he's putting that behind this idiotic Russian plan where Ukraine gives a huge amount of its territory and agrees to core violations of its own sovereignty. That is an unacceptable position for a world leader and a world-leading nation to be in. And so it's nice that it's a start, but a start that begins with failure. And so, no, I don't support the U.S. backing up a plan that's amateur hour and a joke.
I will say this: if the alternative to this plan is going back in time and the U.S. fighting a war with Russia over Crimea, which I think Jamil just called for a few minutes ago, I'm going to go with the Trump plan. As flawed as it is, this thing is actually living in the real world.
That's
Unlike
no surprise,
that diatribe.
Yeah, it's no surprise you would give up and just go with the Trump plan. It's not surprising.
It's no surprise you're living in fantasy land.
Even Lindsey Graham, who's a supporter of the Trump administration, has said this plan is a non-starter. But hey, feel free to lead the give up caucus, Les.
You didn't say it's a non-starter. You said we should have gone back and stopped Russia from invading Crimea.
Great company.
That's what you said. You said we should have stopped them from invading Crimea, which we could only do militarily, which we were never, ever, ever going to do.
Well, the great thing is we actually have Fault Lines. We can do a lot of things here at Fault Lines and NSI. We don't do time travel. So both of you guys, we're going to see what happens because we can't go back.
It's a fun Friday, though. Can we talk about time travel?
That's next Friday. Oh, it's Thanksgiving. Look at that. We won't be here. Anyways, that's a wrap. Thanks to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the Trump administration for putting out that 28 peace plan. For the help in putting together and producing today's episode, join us on Monday, November 24th for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check us out there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.